back. I'm Kimberly. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec. This is the third part of our discussion with Tammy Alvarez, and in this section, we're looking at the future of leadership. How should we be training leaders? How far back in their work career and work journey should we be looking at the leadership training, and what sort of leadership training should we be offering, whether it's on a corporate base or an educational institution base. So let's pick up the conversation and see where it leads.
We have gone over the last 5 years or so through a period of time where we've all worked in different ways to what was the way we worked previously. Do you see a change in the way leadership rolls out now, post all of the lockdowns and the working from home and the hybrid workforce, all of those things? I know in this country, there is an increasing movement to bring people back into the office.
Same in the US. Draconian response.
It is that a reflection of the leadership at the level is making those decisions, being scared. Let's call it what it is. Are they scared of not being in control anymore, of not being able to see the people, and then that is their reinforcement for their leadership style? Should we be developing new leaders from school, from high school, that are focused in different ways?
It's such a great question, and it is such a lightning rod topic, right? And I think we call it what it is, right? It's due to poor leadership, because if you can lead well, you can lead remote, you can lead in person, it doesn't matter. All the studies you look at, like Gallup and, some of these other big, what they're showing globally is that companies know full on that they have a massive leadership gap. Yet when they're asked the next question of what are you doing to solve it, the answer is nothing. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's just like, these two things don't add up. Like, this, you understand the criticality, and all the research shows that people stay for leaders and they leave because, like, all these things. And so I think that the challenge we have now from a leadership perspective, which includes the whole, remote work battle, is also, for the first time ever, we have 5 generations in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And so think about that from a management perspective and trying to get the best out of people the way they need to be reached. That requires a level of acuity that I don't think I needed to have when I was coming through the ranks. And so we're not accounting for that in many cases. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because there's some companies like PwC and things that are doing what they call reverse mentoring, where they have the Gen Zers like showing the, Gen Xers, like how these things work and why they're important and how to motivate. And so I think this can be solved. It's an absolutely, completely solvable problem. But I just don't think that companies are making the investment to do it. And I still can't understand where the disconnect is from. They know it's a gap. They know it's an important gap. And all the data shows it has a massive impact on revenue, profitability, quality, retention, all of these things. Yet they're doing very little to change it.
Do you think that it's a reflection of the amount of information about leadership that's out there? And so the confused mind says, no, I'm not going to do anything. There's just too much to understand and to learn. Because as you were talking, I was thinking, and the results of all of the interviews that we have on the podcast is that all of this information will be useful to somebody, but people get bombarded with information. So and if we get bombarded with people who want to be guests, how do I decide who is going to have the right sort of information for this group of people that we're looking after? And it would be the same if I was out in industry and I was a leader in industry, and I'd be thinking, well, where do I grow now? What do I listen to? What do I do? Mm-hmm. So my mind says, no, it's all too much. Yeah. The Australian way is nah. I'm not going to do it.
No, I don't think Australia has the market on that, right? It's like, too hard, let somebody else worry about it, right? And that's it. And it is difficult. And I think, people are more stressed than ever. I think companies are experiencing a rate of change that is faster than ever. Thank you, AI, and all the other, fun things that are moving us, much faster. And so I think we've got cost pressure. And so most leaders remind me of kind of like elected officials. You only have so much time in your term. And so are you going to do something that's going to benefit the company 10 years from now? Or are you going to do something that's going to benefit your career 10 months from now? And so some of just the natural human instincts of being short-sighted and self-serving, because that is, how we're built as humans sometimes, I think that is just a conflict to what we need to be thinking about longer term. And especially if you're working for a publicly traded company. I mean, you are living quarter by quarter. And many times you're making bad long-term decisions as a trade-off for a short-term win. And so, it's complex. The answer to this is not one-dimensional. But I think when you start to, like what we talk about is, we can fix this in 3 steps, right? And the first step is to really tap into, from a leadership perspective, tap into an individual's aspiration, not their ambition, not their goals, not their skills, but what gets them out of bed every morning, regardless of what they do for a living. And if you can figure out what that is and align that to the company's biggest goals, that's half the battle, right? So step 1, I think, with this leadership development is to understand like where, what fires them up. What can they do for 12 hours a day and end the day more energized than when they started? I mean, for me, I love this stuff. I love coaching, working with my coaches, podcast stages, all those things. I love that stuff. I can do this all day. I'm good at finances and marketing and strategy and all that. But after a couple hours in my office, I'm spinning in my chair, throwing pencils at the ceiling, right? It's just not what lights me up. And so where can we tap into that? Kind of back to that reorg story I was talking about. So that's step 1. I think step 2, from a leadership perspective, to really tap into what's happening is to really develop a better relationship with failure. And I think that kills so much leadership because we look at success and failure as opposites. When here's the reality, you can't succeed without having failed. We know success is not linear, logically, but emotionally we don't. And so if you're preventing failure, you're avoiding success. But how do you do this without feeling like you're going to get fired or you make a giant mistake or look bad or any of those things? And that's where starting to take on that experimental mindset comes in handy as a leader. Instead of making this big, bold statement saying, we're going to take that hill, only to find out that the hill has landmines all over it. You're going to take you're going to go a mile and see how that goes and take a look at it. And so we do this with agile software development, but we don't do it with leadership, and we should be. And I think once we've done that and we start to think, okay, we've got the people that are lit, they're fired up, they're ready to go, we know how to fail successfully, then that third thing is, how do you amplify that? Right? How do you get that to the point where people are better than each rev, they're getting better? And, there's no leadership development program out there that's teaching this right now. We're taking old school principles, trying to apply it to a new way of doing business. And that's where the disconnect is happening. And so that's how we're working with our clients now, in terms of helping them get over that hump and really start to re-engage that workforce that is just kind of, falling into this apathetic haze that we need to disrupt.
No, it's really, because my bugbear is that we don't start early enough with leaders, and that we are teaching the education systems, wherever they are, teach people to fear failure. Yes. And so that gets so instilled in them. I know when I first started doing adult education, it fascinated me that the group in the classroom would be so worried about making a mistake, not doing it right, that they would be not able to do anything. They'd be paralyzed, basically, into making a decision or to doing something in the workshops or the role plays, whatever else it was. And it occurred to me too long afterwards that was because, as a result of that, they were back in a classroom and saying their mindset was classroom. We sit here, we listen to everything, we don't interject, we don't ask a question, we do what we're told, and at the end of the day we get a tick on our piece of paper and we leave the classroom. Once I understood that and addressed it at the beginning of the sessions went much better. But I just think I regret that I lost the time by not knowing that, and I don't see, and that's 30 years ago, I don't see any improvement. Now, people still come into a training room or a session and they sit there like, okay, we got to learn something today. What is it? Well, let's not make a mistake. Let's not say the wrong thing. There's people in this room that are going to judge me if I ask the stupid question, for example.
Yeah. Well, and in the States, the education system is highly based on teaching to a test.
Yeah.
So testing, challenging, critical thinking, saying this makes no sense, or what if? Like that's not part of the test because you can't grade that. So we're doing, more of a disservice for our future leaders than it was back in the day.
I agree with what you said about we need new leadership programs developed for what our needs are now. And I think one of the things that would help to build it would be to ask those multi-generational teams, what do they look for in a leader? Like we know as leaders ourselves, we all have managed different groups of people. And each time you took on a new group, whether it's a group of 10 or 200, you had to see how they respond to leadership. You had to modify your own leadership to reach them and reach the individuals. So if we now see that as a multi-generational need and saying, okay, so now we have that, we just get the essence, what they're saying, and that will help build a leadership program that will help leaders from school age all the way up to the senior, executives.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. And these are not new concepts.
No.
Like we've been leading global teams a long time. And you don't lead an American team the same way you lead a Japanese team.
Yeah.
Or the same way you lead a Spanish team or an Australian team. And so to have that ability as a leader to adjust and adapt to get the best out of your organization and meet them where they are is not a new concept.
Yeah.
But now we've got to apply it generationally and geographically. So it's going to, and things are changing fast. But the idea of really reading the room, basically, and knowing who you need to inspire and how you can get the most out of them. These are things that we should have been doing for a long time. It's getting more complex, but it's not a new concept. So how do we use the old school way of people thinking and apply it in a new and more innovative way? And that's where the fun comes in, at least in my, like, how do we crack that code? How do we help companies crack that code? And that to me is where the fun is, right?
One last question. We've made it. and I think it's something that we've probably covered on and off in all of the conversation we've had, is leading a team of high-performing specialists rewarding or exhausting?
Yes. My answer is yes. And it's really interesting because I've been on several high-performing teams in my career. And I think the one thing that is different in high-performing teams that are rewarding versus high-performing teams that are exhausting is this tiny little word called trust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have been on A teams where we did not trust each other as far as we can throw it, right? And that team, we just didn't get anything done because we were so busy, fact checking things and making sure that things were really what they seemed and, vying for, our leaders, who's going to be the most favorite and all that stuff. Like we just never got things done. But yet when I was on high performing teams where we had that level of trust, we knew each other had our backs. We knew that we were going to make mistakes. We were going to come right out and be like, hey, I screwed this up. We screwed this up. This is going to impact your team. How can I help you fix this mess? Like when you had that level of collaboration, then there was virtually nothing we couldn't accomplish. And so I think the difference between, two really high performing teams is it's all about trust. And how you build that trust within the team really, again, like we've been talking about, comes to leadership. And so, any business is going to need accountability, empowerment, and innovation. Like those are the three levers. And you can't have innovation without those. And so being able to build that accountability culture to each other, not to a higher level, but to each other, and then giving them the room to run, has been some of the most rewarding leadership positions that I've ever had. But if you have a bunch of hired guns that just are out for themselves, then that's a hard road to drive on.
In thinking about that, have you come across in your experience in your career a situation where you just knew you couldn't fix it?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
See, we're amazed at that.
There have been plenty, right? When I was working for a very, very large financial services institution, and it was, we made it through the financial crisis. We got over the hump, if you will. It was a 5-year slog, but we did it. And, I remember leading this new team. The big thing in the States, we were always talking about too big to fail, right? Those systemically risky banks. And I remember thinking, It's like my team can do absolutely everything wrong, and that stock price is never going to move. We get fired, but we're not. The company doesn't change one bit, and we can do everything right, and that stock price is never going to move. And so my head, I'm like, it's not too big to fail. It's just too big to fix. It's just, and that's when I realized that, all the time, effort, talents, like it was time to move to a smaller organization where that impact could actually be felt. Instead of these giant, Fortune 50 companies that are just really like, it is moving the Titanic. And so whether it's an environment of leadership that just refuses to want to progress, I mean, you have to have an appetite for change from the top down. If you don't, it doesn't work. And sometimes companies are just in my case, at least, it was just too big to fix. And so there are times where you have to say, yep, I'm human. Time to go someplace where my talents are better served.
So on the flip side of that, we talked about moving away from the corporate world and that how releasing that was for you. Highlights, things that you didn't expect that turned out so much better than you anticipated or wished for.
Yeah, I think the biggest highlight for me that I never expected was the rush of excitement I get when our clients have those breakthrough moments. You can't beat that rush. I don't care. I don't care how much we beat earnings by and what the stock price went up to, or one of these big projects that we got done. Like I got a text the other day from one of my clients who's now moved into a fractional executive role, and it was him and his German Shepherd on a hiking trail on a Wednesday afternoon. He's like, this is all worth it. And I'm like, I started to cry, and I'm not a crier, right? I was like, oh. So when you see those moments of like, I get it. When you see the leaders looking at their teams having fun again, I just totally underestimated the rush, like the personal satisfaction that I get through other people's successes. And like, I'll never go back, right? There's just, you can't beat it. So I think, by far the biggest highlight is that.
Excellent. Tammy, it's been wonderful talking to you this morning. The hour has just flown by. We do very much appreciate all that you've shared with us. We will put all of the details of how people can contact you directly onto the website. We thank you for your time and your expertise and your sharing this morning. For now, I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne. We've been talking with Tammy Alvarez, and this is Inside Exec.